I think it's sort of the badly formed question.
Hey, I'm glad I didn't take any responsibility.
No. I think it's like a great question for people that, it's a great way to like sound smart and important. And it's like, I have as much fun pontificating on numbers as anybody else. But, you know, whether you say it's 2 or 10 or 20 or 90, the point is it's not 0. And I think another reason I think it's a badly formed question is that it sort of assumes that it's a static system. I think what we need to do is find a way to make the future great, make the future exist, like not tolerate any, you know, branches of it where we just sort of have the doom come to play. But I think society always holds space for doomsayers. There's value to that. I'm happy that they exist. I think it makes us think harder about what we're doing. But I think the better question is, what needs to happen to navigate safety sufficiently well?
Right, so be aware as you're developing things of that possibility, but not indulge in them too much.
More than aware, like really confront it and take it extremely seriously.
Yes, fair enough. So, you know, you've been in this business for a little while now. How have your views of AI changed over the past decade? 5 or 10 years ago, did you expect AI, GPT would become as powerful as it has?
Well, I honestly still think it's not very good. I think we will make it very good, but we have a ton of work in front of us. I think 10 years ago, I probably had a more naive conception of AI as this, like, creature that was going to be off doing stuff, or this, like, you know, magic super intelligence in the sky that would, like, figure things out and rain money on us, and we were going to try to, like, figure out how to live our lives, but it was all sort of confusing. And now I think of it much more like any other technological revolution. Hopefully the biggest and the best and the most important and the greatest benefits. But, you know, we have like a new tool in the tech tree of humanity, and people are using it to create amazing things. I think it will continue to get way more capable and way more autonomous over time. But even then, like, I think it's just going to integrate into society in an important and transformative way, but something that is somehow going to be, you know, I think if AGI got built tomorrow, and you asked me what would happen the next day, 10 years ago, I would have said, can't really imagine it. It should be just this like absolute transformation, singularity, everything is different all at once. And I now think it won't really be like that at all.
So you think in some extent you were optimistic, but you couldn't have placed yourself in the current moment in either way, and it's the same for...
I don't know, like optimistic or pessimistic. I think I was just like somewhat wrong. I mean, there were ways in which it was too optimistic and too pessimistic at the same time. You know, if we make something that is like, you know, as smart as all of the super smart students here, that's a great accomplishment in some sense. There's already a lot of like smart people in the world. So maybe things go faster, maybe quality of life goes up, maybe the economy cycles a little bit faster. But, you know, like if the rate of scientific discovery becomes 10 times faster than it is today, I don't know how different that'll feel to us living through it at that time.
Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. So, you know, just stepping back a little bit and looking at the current models, thinking about AI systems like ChatGPT, what do you think is necessary to remove bias from the systems? And can you offer any example of thinking about bias that are in today's AI systems and how we might think about that going forward?
I think we've made surprisingly good progress about how we can align a system to behave according to a certain set of values. I think, you know, for as much as people love to talk about this and say that, oh, you can't use these things because they're just like spewing toxic waste all the time, like if you use GPT-4, it behaves kind of the way you want it to and reasonably well. And, you know, we're able to get it to follow, not perfectly well, but better than I at least thought was going to be possible by this point, a given set of values. But that gets to a now harder question, which is who decides what bias means and what values mean. How do we decide what the system is supposed to do? How much does society define broad bounds around the edges versus how much do we say, you as a user, like we trust you to use the tool. Not everybody will use it in a way we like, but that's kind of the case of tools. I think it's important to give people a lot of control over how they use these tools. And even if that means that they may use them in ways that you or I don't always like. But there are some things that a system just shouldn't do, and we'll have to kind of collectively negotiate what those are.
I mean, it's interesting thinking about whether you can make the model sort of less biased than we are as human beings in a
Sure
sense.
you can.
Because, you talk about things like in medicine, bias against certain demographic groups, for instance, they're actually trained on the way our human doctors are behaving, right?
They are, but then we do this RLHF step where we can exert quite a lot of influence. Humans are clearly very biased creatures and often unaware of it, and I don't think that GPT-4 or 5 shares our same psychological flaws. Probably it has its own different ones. But yeah, I think these systems can be way less biased than humans.
Something to strive for. Aside from bias, other things that, have sort of been part of the public consciousness in terms of concerns, et cetera, are privacy issues, which loom large for a lot of people when considering the future of LLMs. So, how do we navigate the balance between personal privacy and the need for shared data to train AI models?
I can imagine this future in which, if you want, you have a personalized AI that knows, that has read every email, every text, every message you've ever sent or received, has an access to a full recording of your life, knows every document you've ever looked at, every TV show you've ever read, everything you've ever said or heard or seen, like all of your bits of input in and out. And you can imagine that that would be a super helpful thing to have. You can also imagine the privacy concerns that that would present. And I think if we stick on that frame and not say, well, should AI be able to train on this data or that data, but how are we going to navigate the privacy versus utility versus safety trade-offs or security trade-offs that come with that? And what does it even mean? Do we need a new definition of privileged information so that your AI companion never has to testify against you or can't be subpoenaed by a court? I don't even know what the problems are going to be.
Right.
But this question of where we all will individually set the privacy versus utility trade-offs and the advantages that will be possible for someone to have if you say, I am going to let this thing train on my entire life. That's a new thing for society to navigate. I don't know what the answers will be. I don't know where most people will make the trade-offs. I don't know what we'll say or is even permissible in the bounds. But we faced a little bit of that before about where we trade off some privacy for utility with the services we all use. But that can go so incredibly far with AI. There are all these things that we've had to negotiate with the internet, things about how we think about privacy, how we think about online ads, that when you intersect them with AI become much higher stakes and much bigger trade-offs that I think we're going to start really facing.
Yeah, no, that's interesting in terms of also how much individual control there's exerted. In other words, when you're talking about aggregated data, a good example when you talk about higher stakes again is sort of health record data, et cetera, and how much we can build into it some sort of personal ability to sort of set that sliding scale with how much information you're willing to have as part of that training.
I think in that case we are a little bit, a little bit off in terms of how we have the conversation. What you want out of GPT 5 or 6 or whatever is for it to be the best reasoning engine possible. It is true that right now, the only way we currently know how to do that is by training it on tons and tons of data. And in the process of that, it is learning something about how to do very, very limited reasoning or cognition or whatever you want to call it. But the fact that it can memorize data or the fact that it's storing data at all in its parameter space, I think we'll look back and say that was kind of a weird waste of resources. It is true that GPT-4 can kind of act like a database, but barely. It's slow, it's expensive, it doesn't work very well. It's not really what you want. It's just kind of as a side effect of the only way we know how to make a model, a reasoning engine right now, it has all these other properties. But I assume at some point we'll figure out how to sort of separate the reasoning engine-ness from all of the needing tons of data or storing the data in there, and we'll be able to treat them as sort of separate things, and I think that'll make some of these privacy issues easier.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Speaking about openness, there's been considerable discussion of whether OpenAI is actually open. You said that while it may not be completely open source, it's open in other ways. Can you say a little bit more about this and how you think about it?
We make a great free AI tool available. Hundreds of millions of people, hopefully billions of people will use it in the future. We don't run ads. We just do this as like a public good because we think it's important to put the tool in people's hands. And we want it to be very widely available, very easy to use, very helpful. I think that's just a cool thing.
It is a cool thing. It is funny how it starts as you're talking about how AI gets built into us or our normal lives and that'll evolve. I mean, I think probably most of us remember the first time we saw ChatGPT and we're like, oh my God, that is so cool. Now we're trying to think about what the next generations, what are the next generation of coolness going to be?
By the way, I think that's great. I think it's awesome that for 2 weeks, everybody was freaking out about GPT-4 and thought it was super cool. And then by the third week, everyone was like,
exactly.
Come on, where's GPT-5? I'm tired of waiting.
Exactly.
I actually think that says something like legitimately great about human expectation and striving and why we all have to like continue to make things better. And I think it's like great that a baby born today will never know a world in which the products and services they use are not intelligent. We'll never know a world in which cognition is not like abundant and part of everything that you use. So I think this human discontent with the state of things and the expectation that the world should get better every year, I think that's awesome.
Yeah, no, I agree. So in the past year, new electricity, speaking of less exciting edge of things, the new electricity demand from AI and data centers has been cited as an environmental concern. At the same time, many talk about AI assisting in decarbonization. What are your thoughts about this, the tension between its effect on climate, its ability to potentially help us fight the impact of climate change as it moves forward?
I'll answer that specifically and then more general observation. It is true that AI needs a huge amount of energy, but not huge relative to what the rest of the world needs. If we have to spend, and I don't even think, if we spent 1% of the world's electricity training powerful AI, and that AI helped us figure out how to get to non-carbon-based energy or do carbon capture better, that would be a massive win. And even if we didn't do that, if that 1% of compute that we spent on AI let people live their lives better and have to I read this thing about the compute Google used once compared to the amount of carbon that people used to spend driving in their cars places to get information. And you have people saying Google's so horrible, we should shut it down. It's like spending all this energy. And it was intellectually a very dishonest thing to say because it was a net savings in energy, I think pretty clearly. The internet in general and what it lets us do for telecommuting probably also a savings. So for AI, yeah, it's going to need a lot of energy. We're going to keep figuring out way more efficient algorithms, way more efficient chips. We're going to get fusion. We're going to power the stuff this way. So I think it is important to address this issue, but we will in all of these fantastic ways. But I think this points to something else, which is you opened asking about P-doom. And the level of doomerism in society right now, I think the way we are teaching our young people that the world is totally screwed, that it's hopeless to try to solve problems, that all we can do is sit in our bedrooms in the dark and think about how awful we are, is a really deeply unproductive streak. And I hope MIT is different than a lot of other college campuses. I assume it is, but you all need to make it part of your life mission to fight against this. Prosperity, abundance, a better life next year, a better life for our children. That is the only path forward. That is the only way to have a functioning society. And there will always be people who want to sit around and say, we shouldn't do AI because we may burn a little more carbon, or we shouldn't do AI because we haven't fully addressed bias. And it turns out a couple years later, we made a lot of progress on both of those things. And the anti-progress streak, the people deserve a great life streak, who are usually the people that have quite a lot of privilege in the first place, is something I hope you all fight against.
Yeah. Coming to MIT fairly fresh from the outside, I think this is sort of core to the MIT ethos, which is, naming the problems and figuring out a way to solve them.
I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. We're very happy you are here. The other thing you said that really struck me as we think about the costs of AI, I don't just mean monetary costs, whether it's climate or anything else, it is this notion of deducting what AI can contribute to the problem as not a cost, you know what I mean, as sort of a long-term balancing of the ledger that I think is important.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. Does OpenAI intend to build tools that will specifically impact science and engineering, or will you be more focused on sort of business and consumer applications?
For sure, we intend to do that. I think personally, the thing I am most interested in is how we use AI to increase the rate of scientific discovery. I believe that is the core engine of human progress, and that it is the only way we drive the sustainable economic growth that we were talking about earlier. People aren't content with GPT-4, they want GPT-5, they want things to get better. Everyone wants more and better and faster, and science is how we get there. So of all the great things that AI will do, I am personally most passionate about the impact that I hope it will have, expect it will have on science. That said, this may all be more one-dimensional than we think. If we make a great AI tool that can help people solve any kind of problem in front of them, that can help people reason in new ways, that's great for consumers, it's great for scientists, it's great for businesses, it's great for education. The G of AGI, the general, is sort of the surprising piece.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And I come back to your comment about, sort of getting in your old car and driving to the library. A lot of the creativity part is still human, but a lot of the aggregating all of the knowledge that you can use as a launching point can really be expedited, by asking a few key questions to AI up front.
Totally. I mean, again, what any one individual, and certainly what any group of us will be capable of, I think if we could go see what each of us can do 10 or 20 years in the future, I think it would astonish us today. Yeah. It's maybe in a few years, it's each of us has a great chief of staff or PhD student or whatever analogy you want that's off helping us optimize ourselves and do our best work and our best ideas and whatever. And then maybe at some point it's each of us has a full company full of brilliant experts of anything, just working super productively together.
Cool. So, what advice do you have we have a lot of young researchers or people who are aspiring to be young researchers in the audience. What's sort of your general advice for making a real impact in the world? And, you alluded to it in terms of thinking about possibilities and not sitting in your bedroom in the dark. I think that's a good base recommendation. But I'm just wondering what else you might want to say to this audience about that.
First of all, I think this is probably the most exciting time to be launching your career in many decades, maybe ever, I don't know. But it's whatever it is, it's a really big deal. And the fact that you have this huge tailwind means I think you can take more risk than usual. I think if you do something that doesn't work out, there's just going to be phenomenal opportunities for a long time. I think you can have more impact than normal. And so there's a premium on having this be a period where you work really hard. I certainly would be biased to do something with AI, but of course I'm going to say that, so maybe it's wrong. I think in general, the kind of core, the most important lesson to learn early on in your career is that you can kind of figure anything out, and that no one has all of the answers when they start out, but you just sort of stumble your way through it, have a fast iteration speed, try to drift towards the most interesting problems to you and be around the most impressive people and have this like trust that you'll successively iterate to the right thing, and you can kind of like, you can do more than you think faster than you think. And people, it takes a while to learn that lesson, but it gets, you know, you see it work a few times and you really start to trust it. And so like, you can just do stuff. Sounds like not real advice or like very empty advice, but I think is like, it's much more profound than it sounds on the surface. The other thing I would say is figuring out relatively early on, and this takes some practice, kind of like what your own personal, I don't even know what to call it, like passion, mission statement, like the kind of way you want to spend your time or what you really care about. You know, we talked about like this concept of like techno abundance as a way to drive like prosperity and better lives for people. That's been something for me that has always really resonated, and I've always tried to figure out like how to work on that. But having some sort of like letting yourself develop some sort of like guiding principle of how you make decisions about how to allocate your time and where to try to like steer things, that was like, that's been very helpful to me.
Yeah, I think this follow your passion, and also, you know, you're painting a picture of a world where there's sort of infinite possibilities, and, you know, you can't always be so strategic about what you think is good for you to do. You want to do something that imagines all those possibilities and follows those passions.
For me, it's like passion is not quite the right word. It's like something closer to like, what is the moral obligation for me to work on? And on like the really bad days when I'm not having fun, that's somehow like, it's much more motivating than just the thing I like doing the most.
That's interesting. Another element of this, and this is actually a really core part of MIT's culture, is entrepreneurship. And so we have a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs, so there's, you know, developing the sort of underlying ideas, but how do you think about building successful companies in today's ecosystem, and what part of the value chain where should new startups sort of focus their effort?
Again, I think this is like the best time for new startups in particular in a very long time. Startups tend to succeed right around the time of big platform shifts. Big companies are slower and less innovative than startups, but they have a lot of other advantages. When you get the speed and iteration and cycle time advantage the most is when like the ground is shaking. And right now, I think there was like a moment like this right when the internet happened. There was a moment like this, although smaller, after mobile. There was another moment, also smaller, after AWS and this idea of like cloud services. And then for a very long time, like more than a decade, we've just been sort of waiting. And I think now we finally have a new platform. And so if history is a guide, which usually it is, and I suspect it will be this time, it's an amazing time to start a company. And the advantages you have as a company are you can move much faster, you can like live in the future more than like big companies that have quarterly or annual or whatever they have planning cycles. And that's how you win, and I think this is a great time to do it.